Welcome to Synthesize This. In this episode, I'm going to be synthesizing an expressive lead patch on a Korg MS-10 vintage analog monophonic synthesizer. Let's get started. So right now I have a fully initialized patch. The cutoff frequency is all the way open. The ADSR is shaped like an organ. I have a basic sawtooth, 16 foot, and no modulation. So what I'm going for is an expressive lead sound. And what I mean by expressive is I have controls that allow me to change the sound over time as the mood strikes as I'm soloing. So it's going to be based on pulse width modulation. We're going to sprinkle in a little bit of noise. And I'm going to rely on this mod wheel and this momentary switch here for expressivity. So the first thing I'm going to do is shape my amp envelope. I want a little bit of attack and a little bit of release. I'm also going to select the 8-foot range. I'm going to change my oscillator to be the pulse wave. This way I can engage pulse width modulation. So by default from the front panel, I can only modulate the pulse width by hand. But since I want to free my hand to use the mod wheel here, I'm going to assign the inverted envelope to modulate the pulse width. And the only way to do that is from the patch panel. So we have this reversed envelope generator output here, which I'm going to patch into the pulse width modulation input. And as you can hear, as the envelope is raising and falling, it's also modulating the pulse width here. And now this knob controls the modulation amount from this input. That just adds a little flavor and variation to the sound as you hold down a note. Another thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of noise along with my signal. And since we only have one oscillator here, I can't mix two oscillators together. So if I want to add noise in addition to this oscillator here, I have to rely on a patch panel. So I have this external signal input here, and I have a white noise output here. It's going to route white noise into my external input and higher the volume here. The key is to make it pretty subtle. And it's important to play melodic lines as if you were actually playing the patch in a musical context to get a feel for what the different parameters sound like. So for example, if I exaggerate the noise, it may sound good in isolation, but as you start playing melodies, you quickly realize it's way too much. Similarly, I lowered the pulse width modulation from the envelope generator as I realized while I was playing it was a little too annoying to have it fluctuate so much. Another key component that I like as I'm soloing is to have the mod wheel modulate the cutoff frequency of the filter. Right now the filter is fully open, but we can close it down. So basically I want to be able to open and close the filter as I'm playing lines. Of course I can just do it with the knob here as I'm doing now. But I prefer to have my hand here, and especially with this momentary switch, which we'll tackle later. So we have a modulation wheel output here, and we're going to patch that into the cutoff frequency input here. And now I have a modulation amount here. So I'm going to bring my mod wheel all the way up, and I'm going to adjust the modulation amount here to adjust what the fully open filter will be. I also like to gauge a bit of resonance and find a sweet spot right before self-oscillation. It also allows me to get these vocal type sounds. And finally, the last thing I like to do is to engage a bit of vibrato. Normally, I like to assign vibrato to aftertouch, but since we don't have aftertouch here, the next best thing is having this momentary switch button here. And the way I'm going to do that is you see this little switch here, which can engage the modulation generator only when this button is pushed down. So I'm going to set the modulation generator to always on for now so I can find the right parameters for vibrato. Vibrato is just the change in pitch over time. So I'm going to assign the LFO to pitch. So right now you can tell it's always on. But if I turn it to momentary on, now I can use this button here to bring it in. Let's lower it a bit. I'm going to bring the noise down a little bit too. So now as I perform, I can open and close the filter and engage vibrato with this button here. Another thing you can engage to make lead sounds a little more pleasing is a little bit of portamento. So it's a pretty simple patch, but I really like the basic tone of the MS-10. And the filter sounds great, especially as you crank the resonance up towards self-oscillation. You get this really growly, almost vocal sound as you bring the filter cutoff up and down.